my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm going to cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is in partnership with Needed. The prenatal vitamin industry is failing us, leaving 95% of us depleted during one of the most nutritionally demanding times in our life. There's overwhelming evidence that higher standards of nutrition will improve fertility, birth outcomes, and the trajectory of life. Despite this, most prenatal vitamins only provide bare minimum nutrition. Needed goes way beyond bare minimums with products that can fully meet the needs of our minds, bodies, and babies. Needed's radically better nutritional system is third-party tested and rigorously developed with the endorsement of over 10,000 women's health experts. In addition to their prenatal multivitamins and pre- and probiotics, I am obsessed with their cognitive support supplement, which helps with brain fog, which I know is such a struggle when you're postpartum. A new exciting product from Needed is their Prenatal Choline Plus. Choline is super important for baby's brain development during pregnancy and breastfeeding. It also helps with your mood and metabolism, and it's a bulky ingredient, so it's hard to get enough that you need into your prenatal vitamins. So this separate one is going to get you to the 91% of your daily value versus most prenatals that only have about 1/10. So go over to Needed and check out how you can bundle that with your prenatal vitamins, and it's a really exciting new product that they're offering. At this point, I've talked to so many Birth Hour listeners who have discovered Needed through the podcast, and I love hearing the feedback that they're feeling better during pregnancy since starting with Needed's prenatal vitamins. Needed has all your needs covered from preconception to postpartum and beyond. Needed also simplifies things by bundling core products into easy and flexible monthly plans. You can use the code BIRTHHOUR for 20% off your first order and up to 40% off monthly plans at thisisneeded.com. Since this discount applies to your first order only, I always recommend going with one of the plans for the best value. At the end of this episode, I talked to Ryan, co-founder of Needed, about their recent IRB study results and what makes their products really stand out. So stay tuned for that conversation at the end of this episode. Before we get to today's birth story, I want to talk a little bit about our online childbirth course. It's called Know Your Options, and this is the course you've been looking for if you just have that gut feeling that you know you should be taking a childbirth course, but maybe the one that's being offered to you by your care provider is not exactly what you're looking for. It might be more catered towards the type of birth they want you to have versus making you informed of all your different options and how to address different things that happen in birth, because as this podcast has shown us, birth is very unpredictable. So we would love to have you check out our 12-module course. You can go to thebirthhour.com/course to see detailed outlines of what is included in the course. You will also get a bonus course called Beyond the First Latch that is an additional 6 modules all about pumping, feeding your baby, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan. And we have a special coupon code for you. It's 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. Again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. Another great way to be part of the Birth Hour community is by supporting us over on Patreon. So by pledging your support each month at the $5 a month level, you can get access to all of our archived episodes, so over 800 additional episodes not in the main podcast feed, as well as our private Facebook group that has such a great backlog of information. Just using that search bar, you can get almost any question answered, and you're going to find really supportive people there that are going to become your friends. And in addition to that, we do monthly Zoom calls. Just go over to patreon.com/Birth Hour and become a Patreon member and come see what it's all about. It's just $5 a month. You can get an even bigger discount. If you want to do an annual membership, you'll see that option there. And there's also an option to get it as a gift. So if you have a friend or a mother-in-law or somebody asking you what they can get you to help you prepare for baby, maybe you want a Birth Hour Patreon membership so that you can listen to more and more birth stories and find great community. So again, head over to patreon.com/Birth Hour to get started with that. Today's birth story guest is Justina, and she has a positive hospital water birth story to share with us. She shared her first birth story back in 2020, episode 510, and you can listen to that in the archives via Patreon. I will do a direct link to that in the show notes as well as in the podcast app where you're listening to this episode. All right, let's hear from Justina. Hi, Justina. Welcome back to the Birth Hour. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast again.
Hey, Bryn. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. I'm excited to share my story.
Awesome. Well, as I mentioned, you've been on the podcast before. It was back in 2020, episode 510, which we'll link to. But will you just kind of tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm from New Bedford, Massachusetts. I live with my family, my 5-year-old daughter, my husband. This is our home city. I have a practice here. I specialize in women's pelvic health, so I have my private practice here. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay. All right. So we're hearing the birth story of baby number 2 today. Why don't you just start off by telling us about finding out you were pregnant and how your pregnancy went?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So pregnancy was not without challenges. We conceived in March of 2024 following an early loss, February, that month before. And after 3 years of subfertility, I focused on self-care a lot in my pregnancies. Like I had a whole day reserved for it, and it was Fridays, because we were planning for another natural birth. I read or reread lots of books on natural birth. I listened to the Birth Hour podcast, of course. I did nightly affirmations, like fell asleep to hyping myself up about this. The rainbow relaxation from hypnobirthing class that I took 5 years before. Did birth prep stretching, and had this vision to be able to labor in the tub and have like a peaceful, very peaceful way about it. And I wanted to limit interventions, no medications, and have her come when she's ready. I wanted to do a lot of focus on self-care. Part of that was I wanted to work out. Like when I conceived, I was working with a trainer in like a group setting twice a week and had been feeling really good about that. And at least into my early second trimester, I was feeling so fatigued, I couldn't keep up with it. So my workouts were barely anything throughout pregnancy. It was just kind of like a little bit of walking and stretching. So that part wasn't what I had hoped it to be, but otherwise I had like my Fridays, I would have my acupuncture scheduled. I did therapy, massage. I was working with a naturopath, which I found really helpful. So she would suggest like different homeopathic remedies for like if I was experiencing GERD or constipation or, some supplements that could be helpful in pregnancy, and just schedule appointments that I needed on that day. And I was working. My practice was actually pretty busy at this point. And I was working like at least 30 hours a week. I wasn't really able to keep up with that as much also. I took a nap every day in my pregnancy. And if I didn't actually sleep, I would at the very least lay down almost every day and just try to rest, put my feet up. It felt kind of necessary for me. And I mentioned I do pelvic floor PT. I actually do quite a bit of birth prep, pregnancy care, and postpartum rehab. So I was seeing a lot of patients around this point too. And once I was up to my 3rd trimester, I was eating 5 dates a day. I was sipping my raspberry leaf tea, started working with a doula, which was something that this was my first time working with a doula. I highly recommend. For me, it made a lot of difference. It kind of took, I think, some of the pressure off of my husband to be that person. So I really liked her energy, the person that I found and worked with. She also supported me during labor, and then postpartum, she came to my house a few times. So I was due December 2nd, and that was like after Thanksgiving Day, so 4 days after Thanksgiving Day. And people would always ask, when I was due, and I just want to make it to Thanksgiving. That was my goal. So Thanksgiving came and went, and I got to have my Thanksgiving meal and not be in the hospital. So I was happy about that. But pregnancy was generally, it was a good experience, just very exhausting.
Yeah, it sounds like you were super intentional throughout it, though. And I love the setting aside one day a week. That's so nice because then you can't just like keep putting it off. And then by the time you realize it, a month's gone by,
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then you mentioned you had a doula. Do you want to share anything else about preparing for birth this time and maybe anything that was different from the first time?
Well, during my first pregnancy, we did hypnobirthing courses, and that was like, I think there was like a 6-week series. So I didn't take a child prep course this time around. I was just kind of like rereading that material.
Yeah.
And kind of trying to get in that same mindset. So there wasn't as much. I think sometimes when you have a little one, it's a little bit harder to get to those kinds of classes, just practically. But yeah, so it was just kind of tapping back into that mindset that I was in to, do like a hypnobirth.
Okay. All right. Well, anything else from pregnancy you want to share, or do you want to go ahead and get into the birth?
Yeah. So my due date was on a Monday, and on Mondays, I'm home with my 5-year-old, and we would spend the day together. And this was my due date, so I had made no real plans. Her name's Khadijah, so she was asking for a new toy that day, which she never does. So I said, okay, well, like, we got to do some errands. After that, we'll go pick out a toy. And so we did some last minute things like got the car seat inspected. I dropped off some things to my office, and then we went to Walmart because I didn't know like where. There's no toy store really, so we went to Walmart, and we walked up and down the toy aisles. And I felt like there was like this bowling ball between my legs walking through Walmart. So when we got home, I took a nap, as I mentioned, like I do most days. And she was just playing with her new toy. And I started to feel discouraged that I had no signs of labor, but it was kind of like a bittersweet feeling because I knew this was my last day with her, just her and I, most likely. We took a nap together, and this was the last time it was just her and I. And I remember she fell asleep holding my hand, and I was just really cherishing that day. I even took a picture of her and I holding hands napping. I did some curb walking that day, like just around my neighborhood before bed, and I had a good sleep. And then the next day was Tuesday. I was just getting last minute things in order, making sure my house is spotless, and, doing as much as I could without doing all the bending and lifting, which was feeling really difficult. Had the hospital bag ready in my car, and I was doing the mile circuit, which is actually something that I go over with my patients. And I was doing that. I found that this really made a difference because I did that. I went on a long walk. I was doing some movement on the ball. And as soon as I got home, I had my bloody show and the mucus plug discharge. So I was like, oh, the mile circuit worked. So I was popping my dates, sipping my raspberry leaf tea, and just kind of like going through the hypnobirthing manual, like as if I could cram all that in. But that was like my last night of sleeping really good. I remember I got like a really good night's sleep.
I love the night before cramming.
I felt like I was in school again. Like, oh, like what are these little strategies? But yeah, you start feeling like you want it to hurry up and get here, but then like, what else can I cram in before I have a baby attached to me? So then, so now it's December 4th. My labor began on this day. I had my regularly scheduled 40-week appointment, which they told me they would do an NST, a non-stress test, if I made it that far along. So this was 40 weeks and 2 days, and my labor gradually progressed over that day. So I went for my regular visit, and they had me hooked up, and they were seeing some decelerations of the baby's heart rate. So they sent me to the hospital next door, which is where I plan to birth. And I was there another 2 hours while they monitored me because they were like pretty infrequent, these decelerations, but they were, I guess, concerned enough that different doctors were coming in, checking in, and they mentioned it could be like the cords around the baby's neck or something like that. So I remember I snapped my last belly picture when I was in the hospital that day, and I was having like just mild cramps, and they did offer to check how dilated I was. I declined. I just went home, and I had a really big lunch, and I did some stretches and bouncing on the ball, and I missed my nap that day because I had to pick up my daughter, pick her up from her daycare, and then I decided that we should go to a Christmas light show, which was just down the road from her school. And it was so beautiful. They had this whole farm lit up with Christmas lights. It was kind of a long walk around the property to see the lights. And then they had this tractor ride. So they take you around the farm to see the animals, and then these more lights and more lights. And it started snowing. It was so gorgeous. And I remember my cramps were kicking in. They were becoming more regular and more intense as the snow's falling. And it's her and I and all these other families enjoying the festive season. And we sat there and we made s'mores. We roasted marshmallows. And I was just thinking, this is my last night with my first baby alone. I just knew it. We went home and my husband, James, put her to bed while I started timing my contractions, and they were 5 minutes apart. And they were lasting about 45 seconds. They were still pretty mild. So I decided to shower and try to get some sleep, but they were too strong to sleep through, to be honest. I tried even a heating pad, and I updated my doula, and so she's just on standby. And the plan was that my mom would kind of take over with my oldest daughter. So I call her. It was around 11. I just wanted to get to her before she went to bed. I didn't want to wake her up in the middle of the night. So she came over to take care of Khadijah and to bring her to school for the next 2 days, because this is a Wednesday. And then that Friday night, she ended up sleeping at my sister's house, which she enjoyed, so she could play with her cousins. So it was nice. I know a lot of women are worried about their firstborn. That's the main. You're going to labor and you're worried about your kid or your other kids. But I felt very comforted knowing that was all set. And the hospital that I chose is Beth Israel in Plymouth, pretty much because they offer water birth. South of Boston here, we don't have that option except for Beth Israel in Plymouth. There's, birthing centers. So that was 45 minutes from me. So, but to me, it was worth it. So for my appointments and everything, I'd go there. They also lean more toward a physiological birth, the culture there, and they have this great midwife team. The midwife who I saw for all of my prenatal care and even my well woman care for my, first child, her practice had to close because they closed the local maternity unit, and she moved over to this hospital in Plymouth. So I kind of knew that's where I was going to end up, and I had great experience there. And I knew going to a place like that would help increase my odds of having this birth that I hoped for. So I call them, and it's 1 a.m. And I let them know I'd like to come in. I spoke with Louise, who was the midwife who I saw for my first birth. And she asked me about my symptoms, and I tell her, and she says, well, you could wait longer. I'm I'm 45 minutes away, and this snow now had turned to pouring rain. So I think it was a really good thing that we did leave when we did, because my contractions were ramping up as we were driving over. I was using a TENS unit to manage some of the pain, which was it was kind of helpful, but it doesn't do a whole lot. By the time that we arrived, I would say we were at moderate intensity for my contractions. They were 3 minutes apart. They were lasting a minute. And I was there for about an hour and a half before I got into the tub, because they set me up for my IV for antibiotics, which I needed because I was strep B positive. They were doing an intake. It felt like there wasn't really a rush. For my first birth, I waited till the very last minute to go. And all of this was a blur, because I'm sure they did an intake and things, but I felt like I was maybe more progressed. So they did check me once I was in the tub, and I was 3 centimeters, which feels like they take the wind out of your sails when you hear that. You're like, what? I have so far to go, But she said I was fully effaced. She's like, it's not going to be long. You're fully effaced. And at this point, my doula's there. She came and she set up the room, my doula, Sarah, and she had essential oils diffusing, and she put these pretty, pretty lights that were on the ceiling, and the staff had turned the room into this massage vibe, because they asked me what kind of music I wanted, and I was like, just massage, very chill vibe. And I feel like that kind of sets the tone for when any providers walk into their room, they're like, oh, okay. And they take it down a notch, So
yeah, like spa atmosphere instead of hospital.
match this energy.
Yeah.
So it was a nice vibe. I got to be in the water, which just feels lovely when it's just warm and kind of like helps your muscles to ease. That like I immediately start like my breathing patterns changing and all of that. So I was really grateful they had it all set up for me. And now this place has one tub, and I was like really hoping that nobody else was going to want the tub, and it just worked in my favor because it wasn't in demand at all. So my doula and I decided we would take the homeopathy that I brought that was indicated for ripening your cervix. I had like this homeopathy kit for, whatever came up. So we took that to move things along. And it's like around 3:30 a.m. now. I labored in the tub. They were monitoring the baby's heart rate pretty often. They were having, these concerns about the heart rate from earlier that afternoon. One thing I was not a candidate for that I was hoping would be an option was the nitrous oxide. But they said because my B12 levels were so low. And unfortunately, I was supplementing with a B complex vitamin, but it just wasn't enough because they had tested me earlier in pregnancy and my B vitamin was low. So I thought that by supplementing and it just wasn't enough. So now I actually use a liquid B vitamin because it's more bioavailable because it wasn't being absorbed well.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't heard that before about the nitrous.
I didn't know that was a contraindication, but yeah, they said it wasn't an option for me. So it all worked out, but that might be so helpful for someone else to know. So the nursing staff and the midwifery pair that I had was just top notch. I felt really well cared for. They were definitely on top of the baby's heart rate issue. It was kind of swirling around me, like a lot of conversation about it and what to do. And I'm like trying not to worry about this, but they're kind of like shifting shifts, right? Around 7 a.m. is when this happens. This is kind of my least favorite part of the whole labor because they had me get out of the tub and I had to be on like the continuous monitoring because of these heart rate concerns. I think when I look back on it, I think I was going through transition. I had to be on this table and stay still. They did give me the peanut ball when I'm on my side and offered me, like I moved over into all fours and grabbed the back of the table. I was struggling at this point. And something that I learned from Ina May Gaskin's book was like for pain management or for like facilitating dilation was to make out with your partner. So we tried that. We did it. We were doing some pretty heavy making out, nipple stimulation. I think it helped. I also asked to go back in the tub, and the midwife who I had at the shift change, she was awesome. She said, let's compromise. If I can break your water, we'll get you back in the tub. And I asked why, and she explained things would move along faster. We just want to get the baby out safely. And I agreed. So from there, as we agreed, I get back in the tub. And I also think there was a conversation that I'm 9 centimeters at this point. I think that's where she was like, you're just about there, right? Once my water broke, or they broke my water, it intensified significantly. So I'm back in the tub. I'm in kneeling and like kissing my husband again. And I get this instinctual urge to push. And I'm holding his hand, and my doula's on the right of me. She's just gently reminding me to make low noises. And it felt so right. I was like so grateful that she prompted me in that way because I knew that. Like I knew that when I wasn't in labor. But just having her like gently remind me to do that, it was just perfect timing. And then the nurse who came on at 7 a.m. could tell she was really wise. And she was just like, she wasn't overbearing. I didn't really want a lot of coaching for pushing, but it was just enough. It was like just encouraging enough And then I felt like the presence of all these women in the room. Like the nurses from the overnight shift didn't leave because they were like, oh, we're not missing this. Then I had the 2 nurses came on, and then there was a student, the midwife, and I felt very held, and I felt like all their strength pouring into me. I felt the strength of every woman in that room before me. I felt my ancestors protecting me. I felt proud because I got to do it in this way that I had planned and prepared and hoped for. And, I felt like, okay, I can do this. So she was birthed, and kind of like in the water, I'm kneeling. It was a super instinctive pushing phase with maybe, if I could guess, maybe like 8 to 10 good pushes. She did emerge with the cord around her neck, but I wouldn't have even known it because the midwife, she just swiftly repositioned it before I got another urge to push, and the rest of her body came out, and she was so healthy. It was a team effort to move us from the tub to the bed. And I know that was something that they're worried about, is that safety and transitioning when you're all wet. Because they did explain that to me when I was trying to get back in the tub. They're like, well, you're going to have to carry the baby and you're going to be all wet. I'm like, I can do it. I'll do it. When they did ask me to do it, I need a minute. My legs were dead. But we did it. We got into the bed. I had no birth injuries. They wrapped me up with lots of towels because I'm like shaking, sobbing and overwhelmed. I was just filled with gratitude and pride. She breastfed really quickly. We had our golden hour. She is named Naima Shade Perry. She's so beautiful and healthy. She had a little jaundice, and which they explained is because our blood types are not a match. So she had to be under these blue lights. And yeah, she's amazing.
Sounds like such a peaceful story. I feel like when the nurses don't want to go home because they're so excited for your birth, it's a good indicator.
Yeah, it was so parallel to my first birth, Brand, which the same thing happened. Because both my babies were born just after 7 a.m. Overnight shift hung out, and both times I kind of left the house around 1 a.m. Baby came around 7, pushed them out in all fours kind of position. So very parallel.
All right. So what about postpartum this time?
Well, postpartum, I did stay 3 nights in the hospital since she needed an extra night of monitoring due to jaundice. Postpartum, I consumed my placenta. I had it in the form of capsules. I saved like a week's worth for my first menstrual cycle. About a week after birth, I had blood work ordered by my naturopath, and she ordered different supplements for me to support like my thyroid health and some things that she felt I needed at that point. So I was really grateful for. I didn't have as much like anxiety postpartum this time around. In my community, there's an organization called the Sacred Birthing Village, and they support women of color, birthing people, not just women, but it's led by a friend of mine named Soraya, and she organized a meal train for me. I had the most delicious, healthful, warm meals for the first 6 weeks. I had enough. Sometimes I would freeze it. I didn't cook for like the first 12 weeks because I had already frozen some meals, and it was like really nutritious options, lots of soups, and it was the winter time. So I just like really enjoyed that. Foods that were easy to digest. And I just remember getting so excited to get a delivery, and it helped keep me fed, but not just me, because I could, also share this with my picky toddler or, but just my family. It was just really, really a gift. At 6 weeks, we did a bone closing ceremony for me, which was led by my doula and attended by the women in my family. This was really special to me because I got to share my birth story, kind of like I am now, just maybe a shorter version. I got to share that and reflect on that, which was like really nice kind of closure. I felt like I was closing a chapter, and then, honoring really what my body could do. I cried a lot. It was definitely like I was able to release some emotions. It's a practice that I hope to pass down to my daughters. kind of like the mother's blessing ceremony that we did during my pregnancy. We did that kind of in place of a traditional baby shower, which was just a really loving ceremony. There was like a foot bath for me and prayers, and it just felt aligned with where we are as second time parents, where we didn't need a ton of stuff, but just kind of like wanting that support.
Yeah.
So I have good memories about my birth and my postpartum. Like the hardest part, just helping my 5-year-old adjust. I would say like the first 3 months was challenge for her and trying to find her place. So just trying to support her and through that challenge. That's probably the hardest part.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a very similar, a midwifery team. My first birth, I was able to have a tub labor, but not a tub birth. So I kind of like went out of my way so I can have that option. I think it helps me to avoid injuries, and it just made the pushing feel a lot more intuitive for me. And then, after having trouble conceiving, I would say this just whole experience helped me feel confident again in my body and trust her and know that I'm capable, and to kind of like trust in the timing of my life, because if I didn't have to wait, I wouldn't have Naima. So
Yeah.
I'm also really, really grateful for resources like this one, because just hearing these stories just helped to reduce a lot of stigma and a lot of confusion, and just feels really powerful to be able to share this too. So I appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad that other stories were helpful, and I'm sure yours will be as well. And I've heard more and more recently about this bone closing ceremony. So we've talked about it on some of our Patreon Zoom calls, but I don't think anybody's shared it on a episode before. So that's really cool.
I think it was really worthwhile. For me, it's kind of like we're done growing our family. So it felt like a good time. But it doesn't have to be at that point. It can be after a loss. It can be way later in life, like after menopause. But I'm just really, really grateful I got to have one, just right around 6 weeks when I was feeling like, okay, because I do own a business, I was starting to pick up a little bit back on my work and just, kind of coming out of my little newborn bubble.
Yeah. All right. Well, any other resources you want to mention?
Oh, yes, I have so many.
Okay.
I wonder if I should send them in a list or something.
Yeah, we can put them on the show notes. That's sometimes the best way to go when it's a long list.
Yeah, I have so many resources, and I'd love to share them maybe in a list.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put them on the show notes. And then what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Okay. So I have a website called oceanpt.com. That's OSHUNPT, like physicaltherapy.com. We're on Instagram, on Facebook, at oceanpt.com. And that's my private practice. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Justina Perry.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for sharing again, Justina.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Bryn.
Now I'm going to talk to Ryan, co-founder of Needed, about their recent IRB study results and all of the great products from Needed. Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast to chat with me about Needed again.
Bryn, I'm so excited to be back.
Awesome. Well, before we get into all of the new things happening over at Needed, can you just share with my listeners a little bit about who you are and your role at Needed?
Absolutely. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Needed.
All right. So I recommend Needed to my listeners, my followers on Instagram all the time. I've been using the products for over a year now. And I just really love that with your perinatal products, you really go beyond the bare minimum. And it's just really important, especially for the people in my audience, because we know that during the stages of life where you're growing babies and feeding babies are especially nutritionally demanding. So I love that you guys are addressing these nutrient deficiencies and talking about now that not all prenatal vitamins are created equally. And on that note, your team just released the results of an IRB study highlighting these differences between standard prenatal vitamins versus Neededs. Can you just talk a little bit more about this?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so excited. This has been a baby of mine for a while.
Yeah.
But basically, there is overwhelming evidence that proper nutrient levels can improve fertility, birth outcomes, and the trajectory of life for both mother and baby thereafter. Yet, as we all know, despite our little kind of communities, nutrition has not been front and center in the perinatal standard of care. And most prenatals on the market provide bare minimum nutrition support. We're designing and conducting studies to add to the clinical literature to unequivocally prove that women deserve more support, resources, and radically better nutritional care. We really just fundamentally think the evidence just cannot be ignored anymore, as the lack of nutritional support is really failing women and children. So our goal for this study specifically was to take a more comprehensive look at nutritional status in pregnancy. The study compared nutritional characteristics between women taking the needed prenatal multi and a standard prenatal vitamin.
Okay.
We collected survey data and analyzed nutrient biomarkers, so nutrient levels actually in the blood themselves, in a diverse group of 235 adult pregnant women across 7 U.S. states. And what's really exciting, and what you're hinting towards, is that the results actually revealed quite striking insights into how maternal nutrition status differs by the type of prenatal vitamin a woman is taking during pregnancy. Specifically, we found that women taking the needed prenatal multi had higher blood levels of key nutrients for pregnancy, including vitamin D, B6, selenium, and zinc, among a number of others. When we compared prenatal subgroups, we found that only the group of women taking the needed multi had sufficient blood levels of vitamin D and vitamin B6 compared to the group taking the standard prenatal. And nutrients like vitamin D and B6 play key roles in pregnancy in supporting both maternal and baby health outcomes. So it's really exciting. And it's also important to reiterate that our study was diverse and the prenatal groups were comparable on several key factors outside of their prenatal vitamins. This is really important for the rigor of the study. So for example, 1/3 of the women in each group identified as a race ethnicity other than white, and women in both groups were in similar stages of their pregnancy.
Okay, and what does the IRB part mean?
The IRB is the Institutional Review Board, and they're basically a committee that reviews clinical research involving human subjects to ensure that certain ethical standards are met.
Okay. It's super important when studying pregnant women.
Super important when studying pregnant women, and in terms of showing proper kind of rigor and study design went into the methodology of how we conducted the research as well.
Right. So one thing that I thought was interesting is that a lot of this past studies weren't even done on pregnant women or even women. Oftentimes it was like based on white men as far as vitamin levels and things like that. So as you mentioned, these are really striking results. And what does this really mean for women in the trying to conceive or pregnancy or postpartum season of life? Like, what should we be taking away from this data?
You're right that sort of there is a lot of missing gaps in the research, though we also have found that there is a lot of really good research emphasizing the need for better nutrition at this stage of life. But overall, we see this study as adding to the growing body of evidence showing that, one, meeting nutritional needs through diet alone is very challenging in modern context. So supplementation is needed. Two, that most pregnant women in the U.S. fail to meet dietary recommendations for certain key nutrients that are very important for pregnancy, like vitamin D. And third, I think increased evidence that standard prenatals are really falling short in closing the gap between nutritional needs and dietary intake. And overall, we hope this study leads to more clinicians and moms advocating for the nutrition that is needed for a healthy pregnancy.
Yeah, and I've been sharing about this with my followers on Instagram from some of the data you guys are talking about. And one thing I thought was really interesting was the statistic about how few care providers are discussing nutrition with pregnant and postpartum women at all.
Yeah, that is absolutely striking. We found that nearly 80% of women reported receiving little to no nutritional advice from their OBGYN during their pregnancy care.
Yeah, and this is something that comes up on the podcast a lot because I feel like people really notice a difference when they have midwifery care versus OBGYNs because nutrition is something that's talked about in these much longer prenatal appointments and things like that. So, yeah, it's a big part of feeling good throughout pregnancy, and I know that one thing that Needed really focuses on as well is that it's not just during pregnancy but also postpartum. So, can you talk a little bit about that as well?
We equate it in a lot of ways to nutritional depletion, and that a lot of the importance for this life stage is in avoiding depletion. So meaning when your body lacks the essential vitamins, minerals, or other nutrients that are really needed for optimal function. And depletion is not something that occurs only through pregnancy, but women are more vulnerable in critical life stages such as pregnancy and breastfeeding. So that postpartum stage that you mentioned right there. And a lot of the problem is that women go into pregnancy already depleted and then increase their depletion in growing baby, so end up in a pretty tough spot postpartum. Mm-hmm. There are many contributors to this depletion, from nutrient deficient soil and stress. And then the signs of depletion like brittle nails, fatigue, headaches, mood changes, thinning hair, constipation, dry skin, all sound pretty familiar to us, right? Mm-hmm. And really research suggests that up to 95% of women experience nutritional depletion even when they are on a prenatal vitamin.
Oh my gosh.
Depletion is, I think, a much bigger problem than we actually, have historically given it credit. And a lot of us, women just assume we have to feel these things, these signs of depletion, just as part of our, that's just the status quo. That's how it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of our sort of emphasis is showing that no, radically better is possible. There are ways to better support ourselves through nutrition to minimize those signs of depletion.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to someone recording their birth story, and they were saying how, they were super focused on their nutrition during pregnancy, and then it kind of fell to the wayside postpartum. And it's like especially if you're breastfeeding, it's taking a lot of energy and nutrients, and then you're also sleep deprived because you have a new baby. So the depletion, I think, like you mentioned, is just something we really need to focus on beyond pregnancy.
Yeah, and most care providers aren't really reminding folks. They think of it as like a prenatal, not a perinatal.
Right.
There are some postnatals that exist, but I think the use of them in that breastfeeding life stage that is actually more nutritionally intensive than pregnancy is a non-supported part of this life stage. And, where we see so many women really talking about that postpartum period being the most difficult. And I think being able to advocate and raise awareness to better support and how do we care for mom, not just care for baby during that stage is very important.
Yes, I'm just nodding along to everything over here. So are there any other supplements that women should consider outside of a prenatal to help fight depletion?
Absolutely. So most prenatals and aren't included are vitamin and mineral blends. And there are many other nutrients that are supportive of combating nutrition. Unfortunately, we just don't think that there's a single product that can fully get you over the hill on depletion lack. So it needed what we are really focused on rather than just a single product, though we do hero our prenatal multi a lot, but really an emphasis on a system of products is most supportive. And for example, we do offer an omega-3 DHA EPA add-on. So DHA omega is often something that you probably do hear as part of taking that alongside your prenatal. And DHA and EPA are very supportive of a healthy pregnancy. Sometimes they are combined with a prenatal multi, but we often see that can lead to kind of lack of nutrient integrity or too low of doses. So we do think it is important to offer it as a separate product for that reason, but do advocate for that being added on to your system of products. And then there's a whole host of other products depending on needs. I personally really love our sleep support, as lack of sleep is a big contributor to depletion. And I also really love our breastfeeding safe cognitive support product. It's a product that really helps me sort of feel like me and try to do it all by being a working mom while still, breastfeeding and chasing after my kids. Being able to focus when I need to focus is a critical part of that.
Yes, I'm a huge fan of that one as well. So you guys offer several bundles and things like that with these add-ons. Where's the best place for people to start if they're trying to decide what's right for them?
Our website does help to guide you by sort of life stage or need, which is thisisneeded.com, or we're at Needed on Instagram. And we actually have a team of trained nutritionists and doulas as part of our customer support team. So they're eager and ready to help if you do want to sort of DM us or email us if you kind of get stuck on the website your own. So that's a great place to start. And then I'd also really recommend folks to go to thisisneeded.com/thrive to learn more about the prenatal study and the rigor that went into it and a lot more results beyond what we're able to share today.
Yes, it's so fascinating. And I'm the same way. Like I can't squeeze it all in to share on Instagram either. And so I'm like, please go check it out because it really is amazing what you guys were able to find out from this study. And I love that people are available in the DMs to help guide because I feel like it can be really overwhelming when choosing your prenatal, and starting with the main prenatal is obviously a great choice, but I know lots of people want to take advantage of these bundles too. So that's great to know that it's available to DM or email.
Yeah, I think we're here to help. And it's really a passion of a lot of members of the team to do so. So we're excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for chatting with me about all of this. It's always great to hear what you guys are up to. And I'm always happy to share with my listeners about Needed.
Thank you for the time.
Thanks again to Justina for sharing her birth story with us. I will link to her first birth story on the show notes and in the podcast app, along with the resources that she has to share and the link and coupon code for Needed. If you want to find that show notes page, you can just go over to thebirthhour.com and search for Justina's name in the search bar, and that'll pull up her episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.